hey, play him. I'm just letting you know you play Christian McCaffrey.
Our highest projected running back this week is none other than Christian McCaffrey. All right, my GPP running back is Todd Gurley. Look, I know he hasn't been the Todd Gurley that we've seen in the past years. But look, he's still clearly the number one running back on the Rams. The whole Darrell Henderson snaps from week 8 was, if you look at only the box score, you're going to be misinformed on it because Gurley was the lead back until he scored early in the third quarter, and 10 of 13 of Henderson's touches came afterwards, and they were in pretty much mop-up time in a game that they controlled against the Bengals the whole way. Look, he's the RB19 in points per reception per game at the running back position. Not great. It's not the top 5 or 10 production we probably hoped for, but he's still been scoring points this season, and he's still been the lead back in every single game. Now he's got this spot where, yeah, okay, the Steelers, 6th DVOA against the pass, 16th versus the run, but if you look a little closer at their schedule, I mean, all the good offenses have been able to run the ball on them. 151 yards from the Seahawks, 168 yards from the Bengals, 138 from the Ravens, 139 from the Colts. Like, teams are running the ball on the Steelers, and we have not seen Gurley this cheap since Sean McVay got there pretty much. Week 1, 2017, and Week 17, 2017, when obviously they had workload concerns. Last time Todd Gurley was this cheap. So 6,100 for the lead back and an offense that should be able to run the ball. Yeah.
And I believe the YouTube audience is just joining us. So if you are just jumping in, remember we're taking questions. We have a lot of questions so far, but there are a lot more wide receiver questions than normal. So we're just going to wait until we get to the wide receiver position to answer all of these for everyone. For the time being, though, once again, we are continuing to show the Rotoworld DFS toolkit on the screen, rotoworld.com/DFS. It is 50% off this week, and we'll probably continue to surge down as we move along here, but 50% off in week 10, so you can take advantage of that. But my play is actually David Johnson, who is far too cheap coming back. Now he has had an extended rest. And yes, Kenyon Drake handled over 80% of this team snaps without David Johnson and Chase Edmonds available last Thursday. But I would fully expect David Johnson to be fully healthy. And I know our own Hayden Winks mentioned he was listening to a team-specific podcast, and they had talked about how Cliff Kingsbury wants to use both on the field at the same time. Even if that isn't the case, and I think that is the case, but even if it's not, the fact is we've had 2 weeks only of overlap when the horizontal raid in weeks 3 and 4 transitioned to a run-heavy. It was like the horizontal run offense, right? And David Johnson in that offense averaged 10 targets per game with Christian Kirk on the field at the same time in weeks 3 and 4. I think it's that same offense in a terrific matchup that has the week's highest slated total and will probably go down as the most plays per game, like the most offensive volume among any game in week 10 slate. So even though I'm using him in tournaments, I think it's just fine if you're looking for value in cash games as well. Yeah,
I think usually when they talk about 2 running backs being on the field at the same time, it doesn't always come to fruition. But when one of them actually can play wide receiver like David Johnson, that's when it could happen.
It's not going to be Kenyon Drake for 87% of the snaps again. Like David Johnson, 100%. He was their best receiver over the last month before he got injured. Yeah. I would expect he goes right back into that role.
For sure. All right, my cash game wide receiver this week is Mr. Golden Tate. You guys saw the catch he had on Monday night. I mean, the guy's playing awesome right now, and he's getting fed the ball. 42 targets since returning from suspension in Week 5. That's the 7th most in the league. PPR wide receiver 16 during that time. I mean, he's playing very well. Sterling Shepard was supposed to be kind of on the verge of coming back with this concussion, but now we're getting IR murmurs, and it's looking like at the very least he's not going to be out there this week again. So Jets defense 25th in pass DVOA. None of these cornerbacks are worth worrying about, and they're banged up with Darrell Roberts popping up on the injury report today with a calf injury. So, one of the staples of the Greg Williams defense is how much he blitzes to try to create pressure, which is great when it works, but when it doesn't work, you're really leaving your secondary exposed and against one of the league's true best receivers after the catch. I mean, that's a pretty burdensome thing to try. So Tate, at least 6 catches in 4 consecutive games. I mean, we saw Julian Edelman, Cole Beasley go at least over 5 catches against the Jets. I think he is the safest wide receiver on the slate, and only 5,900. I mean, I feel like he'd be higher if they didn't have the Monday night game. So
right. A few quick questions here, though. Both the Saquon and Yusuf Deli, something like that, they're both curious about Calvin Ridley and Juju in this slate.
Oh, I love Ridley moving forward. I mean, he's only had 5 career games with at least 8 targets. He scored a touchdown every single one of them. And the one thing the Saints did against the Falcons last season was they actually had Eli Apple shadow Julio Jones with bracket coverage, and they put Marshawn Lattimore on an island with Ridley. Look, Lattimore played really well early in the season. He is doing better this year, I think, than we saw last year. But Ridley, in my mind, is one of these true dogs at the wide receiver position that if you give him enough target volume, the production is going to come. So I'm definitely riding with him.
Yeah, I would definitely go Ridley over Juju, especially because we think Juju likely gets. Well, do you think Juju gets Jalen Ramsey?
No, he lines up in the slot too much.
Okay.
We've never seen Ramsey really do that.
Got it. But I'm still going just because of Mason Rudolph, then that's fine. I would want to avoid Mason Rudolph wherever possible, unless you're Jalen Samuels, because he gets the dump offs.
Yeah.
But yeah, Calvin Ridley, it was unfortunate that he didn't get a target from the slot last week. I thought his slot routes would project further without Mohamed Sanu, but they kind of just all fell in the lap of Russell Gage, who played 78% of his routes from there. Having said that, we know the Falcons will be behind for sure on turf indoors. So yeah, you're definitely leaning Ridley. Do you have any thoughts on AJ Green?
Don't play him.
That's what I'm saying too. I don't really.
If he even plays, man,
I don't think he'll play. But even if he does, they said he has a quote unquote number of plays ready to go. I don't know if that's true either. I would believe he's limited anyhow, and it's the Ravens defense that is not the same Ravens defense as of 14 days ago. It's a much better secondary.
Adding Jimmy Smith has been huge for them. And Marcus Peters, right now, he's playing well. So we've always known Marcus Peters has the ability to play well when his gambles are paying off for him. We see what happens when they don't sometimes. But hey, I think maybe finally, and probably the most sound defensive scheme he's been in a minute, it's been working out.
Maybe you haven't hit it yet. I have a feeling it's probably Singletary, but I'm going to ask you anyway, because Man Jets ask, who's the spaceship emoji play of the week, Ian?
Spaceship emoji. Does it mean helicopter?
You got your emojis wrong, man. I hope you know.
Well,
you got to get your emojis right when you're talking to Harditz.
It officially won't get revealed until Sunday morning.
Okay.
But I like Singletary a lot. But with that said, looking at early ownership projections, he's looking like 26 to 30%. I'm okay eating chalk at running back if we know they're going to get a lot of touches. But with that said, fading Singletary as a road back in tournaments might not be the worst thing ever. We're kind of going off a one-game sample size where Gore really wasn't all that effective last week. There is a scenario that exists where Gore is still the early down back, and last week they trended away from that because Singletary kind of had the hot hand.
Well, it's a weird game anyways, right? The Browns are favored by 3 against the Bills. So let's start there. But then also, a lot of public money is coming in on the Bills currently, a majority ticket, I believe, but the line hasn't moved, which tells you, Vegas knows something we don't. The Browns are going to win by over a field goal, and I don't know how. Yeah. So it's a confusing game to begin with.
I think Singletary is a very good back, but with that said, this is still the Bills. Josh Allen, we've seen him make mistakes plenty of times. Wouldn't shock me, if the Browns are able to kind of get up early and see what happens. But like you said when we were talking about him, the target share is there. So he's not going to sink your lineup, even if he doesn't have the workload that we
And as AJ Green was asked about, I actually just see this coming in breaking. AJ Green's ankle swollen. He was asked if he's going to play, and he said probably not. So that tells you everything you know as the saga continues, and I still don't think we'll see him all year long, I swear to you. Anyways, though, let's go ahead and go to my cash game wide receiver, and it's a guy who I would normally scream regression because he has scored 13 more DraftKings points than Kenny Golladay over the last 3, averaged 13 more DraftKings points than Kenny Golladay over the last 3 weeks, averaged more than 10 FanDuel points than Kenny Golladay over the last 3 weeks. Mike Evans, of course, who's also averaged 15 targets in that span. But this matchup, as we said, expects to have the most offensive play volume of any game in the entire slate. So I have full confidence, especially in cash games, going right back to him. There's all the reason in the world to pivot to Chris Godwin, who still quietly averaged 10 targets in that 3-game span and has been an afterthought to Mike Evans the last 2 games in particular. Chris Godwin is known as a superstar. He's definitely going to bounce back. And if Evans is going to have that much ownership over him, especially let's say it's 20% more ownership than Godwin, I'm just dropping down a couple $100 on both sides and going Chris Godwin in tournaments. That's easy. But I don't think there's any reason to get off Mike Evans in cash games.
Yeah, Patrick Peterson, 2 shadow dates since coming back. Both Michael Thomas and Emmanuel Sanders went over 100 yards and touchdowns. Yeah. So I don't want to call PP wash just yet, but
well, when you come in the middle of the season, it's what happened to Melvin Gordon. Yeah. And Melvin Gordon looked spry last week. Maybe he finally hit himself into shape. Patrick Peterson just needs more reps, and then week 11 or 12 or whatever, then maybe he's the shadow corner we expected the whole time.
Either way, so much volume that Evans will be playing.
Yeah, just fine.
All right. Now, my wide receiver for GPPs is not quite as
You're getting a little
fine,
frisky on me here.
Not quite as fine with the volume as Mike Evans, but Odell Beckham Jr. And guys, I understand it hasn't been there. I am a massive OBJ truther in terms of him being the single best wide receiver in the league, and hasn't been going well through 9 weeks, John. With that said, $6,100 on DraftKings. The last time Odell Beckham Jr. was this cheap was 2014. The issue is not how well Odell is playing. The issue is volume. We've seen him over the last 2 weeks roast at times both Chris Harris and Stephon Gilmore, two of anyone's ideas of the top 5 cornerbacks in the league. It's just 8.3 targets per game right now, which is his fewest ever in a season. He was always over 10 with the Browns. He already has 4 games with fewer than 8 targets, which is his most ever in a single season. Probably going to see shadow coverage from Tre'Davious White, who is, maybe if not a top 5 cornerback, anyone's list of top 10. Tough matchup. With that said, though, what are the Browns waiting for? They need to feed this guy the ball. Baker Mayfield this morning said he wants to force feed.
I saw we got a squeaky wheel narrative going on here.
He wants to force feed Beckham the ball. And again, at that price point, it's a tough matchup, yes, but such a talented player. And I think everyone's just fed up enough with him that the ownership's going to be low.
Mine is sort of the same thing. I know people were concerned about Davante Adams coming back from injury, as was I. But he came back to aplomb. 42 of 50 snaps played last week. A team-high 31% target share, which, as you discussed in particular, said Aaron Jones we were concerned about because in the month that Adams was gone, held a team-high 21% target share down. But then last week returned to an 11% target share because Davante Adams became the only player you can truly trust. I mean, you can still trust Aaron Jones, right? Especially against the Carolina rush defense. But he became the only person in the passing game that you can truly trust with those 11 targets.
Agreed.
And 11 targets, only 41 receiving yards. I would expect that to bounce back given his usage. So I like Davante Adams to return to over 100 yards and a touchdown this week.
Yeah, it was going to be a tough matchup for him against James Bradbury, but he's missed practice all week with a groin injury. So, yeah, fire up Davante for sure. All right, tight end. Look, I know you let some people down on Sunday night, Mark Andrews, though, look, he is going to be absolutely fine. I mean, people look at his snap rate and we're kind of concerned that Nick Boyle and Hayden Hurst are playing in front of him, but that's kind of been happening for the last 2 seasons on and off. They use multiple tight ends in this offense, and, when they were running the ball like as much as they were against the Patriots, yeah, you are going to see Nick Boyle out there a bunch. Same time, Mark Andrews, I mean, in 6 games with Hollywood Brown, Lamar Jackson has fed Hollywood 43 targets, Andrews 42. No one else has over 20. Like, he is clearly the number 1, if not number 2, pass game target in this offense any given week. And the guy's just a stud. We haven't seen him really ball out in too many games recently. He had the drop field game 3 weeks ago. They had the bye mixed in. But we're forgetting how good this guy is both down the field and after the catch. I think he's going to remind people just how good he is. At only 5,200, I think he should be in the 6K range for sure. Still a PPR tight end 7 on the season despite the slip-ups recently. Keep going back to Mark Andrews.
We're going to jump into some tight end questions here in a second, but quickly I just wanted to ask, do you think that Mark Andrews then had his routes cut down because of the running game? Because he obviously ran 13 routes last week, even though he averaged 25 routes per game coming into that week.
I think it's just a 1 week blip.
Okay,
yeah,
that's fair.
I'm not concerned. Like I said, he's just too good. We've seen, before last week, I think he had 7 targets in every single game.
So let's go to Cottage Bob here. Asked about Austin Hooper. He asked about Hunter Henry as well. As we know, Hunter Henry's on the Thursday slate. But let's say you're just playing through Thursday through Monday for kicks and giggles. Do you think Hooper outperforms Hunter Henry, or which one do you think is the safer option?
I'm going with Hunter Henry still. Hunter Henry is leading all tight ends in targets since he returned from his injury. And it's just, I feel like Hooper is going to regress a bit moving forward. It's just, he is not. They never go into game plan meetings going, hey, we're feeding the ball to Austin Hooper this week. Calvin Ridley and Julio Jones are the top 2 options in this passing game, but they just get down every single week and they start feeding Hooper when they're trailing in the second half as their check down guy. And now they're 13-point road dogs this week. Obviously, that exact scenario is looking good to happen again. But I just feel like if you go at any position in terms of the top 5 fantasy performers, I think Austin Hooper is the most overrated when it comes to pure on-field talent and role in the offense. So I'm going to fire up someone like Hunter Henry, who I think is A, a better tight end, and B, more involved in the game plan going into the game.
And then we have, let's see here, Tate. I'm going to try. No, I can't even go for this. TRXST Gaming. Let's just stick with that then. Texas Gaming. Not even close. But would you lean TJ Hockenson, Cook, or Ebron?
That's a tough one.
So Jared Cook, we presume, is healthy after the bye week. He's going to come back healthy. But in his one game with Drew Brees, 3 catches for 37 yards in week 1. I think I personally lean Ebron, who we know will be out. We know he's going to be out-snapped by Jack Doyle, but you're not playing Ebron for the snaps anyway. It's like Kamara. Kamara gets 60 to 65 moving forward. It doesn't matter. He's a top 6 play. Ebron, you're playing for the touchdown equity in what is likely going to be a blowout. So I think I'd rather just take the chance on Ebron. Hockenson in general, I know he had 7 targets last week. Before that, hadn't topped 35 yards receiving. I would imagine, again, last week was just a special game plan. He can't be trusted in fantasy anyways moving forward.
Hockenson is their clear-cut number 4 option in that pass game behind the 3 wide receivers. Cook's number 3 at the highest behind Kamara and Michael Thomas. Ebron could be number 2 with Paris Campbell and T.Y. Hilton down behind only Zach Pascal. I mean, Ebron, he's a tight end, but he lines up most of the time in the slot or out wide anyway, so wouldn't surprise me at all to see him get more involved. With that said, if Mike Gesicki is on your waiver wires, go get that guy.
Mike Gesicki. And then also we have, who is this? JJ Esch asked, we just passed wide receivers, but he asked if there are any 3K guys that stand out. And just quickly in my mind, Russell Gage is one, since he did place, as we talked about, 78% of the slot routes when Mohamed Sanu exited. We expect the Falcons to be throwing a lot from behind. And then also Josh Reynolds, since Brandon Cooks is out. They may go more 12 personnel and take Josh Reynolds. But at least a one-game sample in 2019. He played 89% of the snaps, got 373 and a touchdown in that one game in London before they hit their bye. So if you're looking for a cheap option, those are the 2 guys that stand out to me.
Also liking a little bit Albert Wilson at 3,300 since he should now finally have a full-time role with Preston Williams out. I
am curious if they're going to continue to mix Wilson and Hearns in the slot, because that's what they've been doing. They've just been cannibalizing each other in the middle of the field. But without Preston Williams now to take all those outside roles, the outside routes, I am curious if they finally unleash Albert Wilson in the slot full-time.
Oh, one more guy, 3K range. Ted Ginn Jr., 3,700. This is the boom week.
That's fair. I mean, no complaints. It's not a bad one. My tight end cash game play, though, would just be going back to Travis Kelce. There's just such a big disparity, and there's nothing wrong with paying down at tight end and cash, but there's just a big disparity, just like last week, between Zach Ertz and the rest of the field. If you drop 1,000, it makes it a boom or bust play as opposed to Ertz that was just a safe floor. Travis Kelce, you're getting Patrick Mahomes back. He's only scored 2 touchdowns in the year despite being tied with Austin Hooper for the league lead in targets at his position. He's still tied, I think he's 2nd overall in tight ends among air yards, and then top 2 in red zone targets. 6 end zone targets, has yet to score on one of those, even though the 6 leads his position as well. So it's just numbers and metrics that scream positive regression in this matchup with Patrick Mahomes back under center. So I look for Travis Kelce to not only be a great cash game play, but a great tournament play as well.
Yeah, I like that call. All right, my tournament tight end, I just mentioned him, Mike Gesicki, 3,100. So, look, Albert Wilson, I do think he's a good dart throw, but I think the favorite in this offense to be a number 2 pass game option moving forward is Gesicki, because look, he's a tight end, quote unquote, but the guy's lined up in the slot or out wide in 76% of his snaps this season. He's more or less working as a wide receiver already in this offense, and Fitzpatrick, since their bye week, has been treating him as a number 3 option behind only Preston Williams and Davante Parker. Gesicki, 20 targets since that week 5 bye, Parker 28, Williams 30. I mean, we've seen him in the last few weeks. Fitzpatrick is willing to throw the ball down the seam to Gesicki, and he's a really talented guy that's really big and really fast. I mean, I've been waiting for this dude to break out since he got in the league. I have an unhealthy amount of best ball shares to him. I've been waiting
You're a
for
late
the
tight
moment.
end guy.
I've been waiting for the moment to really trust this guy, and I think it's finally coming now. So Indy is allowing passes to tight end at a top 8 rate this season. I think their scheme is kind of built for players like Gesicki to get fed targets. So good matchup, good role, good talent. Let's do it.
Mine, we just talked about a little bit. I forgot I was going to talk about him, so I already said too much. But it's Eric Ebron. So just quickly, I will say that Jack Doyle did run 32 routes to Ebron's 20 last week. But again, Ebron was only on the field. He only blocked 4 times. When he's on the field, he's a passing game weapon. His floor is miserable, of course. But you're not playing him for his floor. You're playing him for his touchdown equity. So I don't mind him in tournaments as a pivot off of Jack Doyle, whose floor is definitely higher. But as we've seen, he's scored. Eric Ebron, on limited role, has hit double-digit fantasy points in 3 games this year. Yeah, and without both T.Y. Hilton and Paris Campbell. Like, Paris Campbell's absence is a big one. He had 8 targets in week 4 without T.Y. Hilton. I believe he had 5 targets last week. He's definitely involved in the offense. That opens up just a little bit more for Eric Ebron.
One other tight end I want to mention real quick. Dawson Knox at 2,800 is a potential punt because got back to 76% snaps in week 9. Tyler Kroft came back from injury and kind of formed a committee, but they pretty much said to hell with that last week. So Knox is back in full-time tight end. Browns defense, we've seen Delaney Walker, Mark Andrews, George Kittle, and Noah Fant all ball out again.
And J.J. Esch also asked another tight end I don't mind, and it's are you closing your eyes and plugging in O.J. Howard? Because as we know, as we know, the Cardinals have allowed league highs in targets, receptions, and receiving yards to opposing tight ends. If you want any kind of glistening light of hope, there is the fact that O.J. Howard, in the one game before he was injured, ran a route on 67% of the Winston's dropbacks, which was a season high, by the way. Like, they actually used him as a pass-catching tight end. But before getting injured, was still on pace, a full season for 31 catches and 400 yards. It's pathetic. So if you do play O.J. Howard, you just have to understand probabilities and not lock him in as a cheap guy who's going to get a catch. His floor is an egg, literally. So just you have to know that it's a blind faith, cross your fingers. There's no reason to play him outside of a good matchup.
Real quick on the defenses before we make our building block lineup. I like the Steelers at 2,600. Facing Roe Goff, we've seen him make pretty big strides in Minkah Fitzpatrick. I mean, he's one of the best safeties in the league right now. I think anyone should agree with that. And look, again, mentioned before, but I have my mismatch manifesto. I look at the pressure rates kind of between opposing defensive lines and offensive lines. And, Goff's been under a lot of pressure this year, and Steelers have been pretty good at getting to the quarterback. So second worst pressure rate is for Goff this week. And then lastly, the Browns, 2,500 at home versus Josh Allen. Mentioned before, the chances, they are favored, kind of surprisingly, and there is always a chance that Josh Allen has a, more of a Blake Bortles-esque Josh Allen game and, turns the ball over 4 times. So Browns defense isn't great, I'd say, but they still have talent at all 3 levels, and we've seen them kind of play better at different points in the season. So I think this is definitely a week where you do not have to go over 3K to get a good defense.
Well, you took mine because the Browns was mine, so that's fine. We can just move on and make our lineup.
Cool.
Makes everything quicker. Do you want to start, or do you want me to start?
I will start. I'm putting in Lamar Jackson because, look, I mentioned all the rushing thing. He's actually got an awesome matchup through the air this week. Only the Bengals and the Raiders are allowing an explosive pass play rate over 14% this season. So I like Lamar, and, I'll let you pick the next guy, but there's another pass catcher in addition to Mark Andrews that I think we should try to squeeze in here from that Baltimore offense.
Oh, you're going to tell me Marquise Brown, aren't you?
Ooh, we'll see. It's not my pick.
Okay, well, I am not going to fade Christian McCaffrey even in tournaments, so just go ahead and plug in that salary.
Okay.
Get it out of the way.
Well, with that in mind, I am going to go to my guy, Hollywood Brown. I mentioned before when we were talking about Mark Andrews, but look, when Hollywood's been on the field this season, Lamar is force-feeding him and Mark Andrews, and that's pretty much it. None of these other guys in the offense are getting the type of target share really warrant any exposure to. I mean, Hollywood, he wasn't 100% last week. I mean, Harbaugh even came out and said that. With that said, I mean, even his not 100% is pretty freaking fast. I mean, he was erasing angles against that Patriots defense. So now line him up against a Bengals team that is more or less quitting at this point. I mean, it seems like Ryan Finley under center and only takes 1.
All right. I don't know. See, here's the thing. Even when A.J. Green's not playing, if you want to run back something with the Ravens, I don't know what Bengals receiver. I think I might just leave that in your hands. I'm just going to go Travis Kelce. I'm just going to plug in Travis Kelce.
Yeah, I don't want anything to do with that Bengals offense.
I don't even care.
Not even Boyd.
I don't even care if he carries the highest ownership at tight end. We're getting Conturian just by adding Marquise Brown. So
I actually don't think Humphrey is going to shadow Boyd this time around like he did in the last matchup.
Okay.
But now he's a full-time slot cornerback, so he's going to see plenty of Boyd anyway. So unfortunate. All right, I'm going to help out with the defense here and go with the Browns, 2,500.
Okay.
Stay cheap. I don't even hate, I mean, we'll see if we get to, but stacking them with Nick Chubb, we've seen teams, especially the Eagles, be able to run the ball on the Bills this season. And look, Nick Chubb is not going to just lose his 3-down. I mean, he doesn't even have a 3-down roll. He's not going to lose his 20-touch floor to Kareem Hunt. He's already playing 60% snaps. Dontrell Hilliard has been ridiculously involved on passing downs all season. There is more than enough snaps to give Kareem Hunt that won't even impact Nick Chubb.
Yeah, and that will actually drive Nick Chubb's ownership down because
Exactly.
people are worried about Kareem Hunt. Like, they can barely figure out how to involve 2 offensive players, let alone try to get their second running back involved. So it's crazy to me that people think he's going to matter.
I even saw they were interviewing Monken today, and Monken, they asked him about 2 running back sets, and Monken straight up said, like, look, it's not something we've done throughout the season, and we're not really going to overhaul the offense at this point.
As
So.
Monken continues watching on from the booth, doing nothing to help because they won't let him. All right, I'll just lock in David Johnson as our second running back.
Okay.
Like I said, given the PPR points, I really think he gets double-digit targets in this game, and any extra carries, which he will get over 8 carries, any extra carries only help.
All right. So now we got Lamar Jackson at quarterback, Christian McCaffrey.
We're going to need some cheap options here.
Running back, David Johnson running back, a Hollywood Brown wide receiver, Kelce tight end, Browns DST, and we got, 12,500 remaining. So I'm going to go, I'm going to go with
This is the last pick, by the way.
Okay, I'm going with my guy Golden Tate. So our friendly viewers might have to get a little bit cheap.
You're going to have to squeeze in
Yeah,
some.
they're going to have to squeeze in.
I mean, you
but-
might have to play Kareem Hunt after we just talked bad about him.
Look, I cannot stress enough how much I love Golden Tate, though, this week. Again, like, he's shown off this contested catch ability that I don't think he really got a chance to use as much in Detroit as he's getting in New York. I mean, even in Detroit, like, he always had Marvin Jones and Galladay stealing targets. Like, it wasn't, he was the leading receiver in terms of targets in Detroit, but he wasn't the clear-cut #1 pass game option like he is now. We mentioned Shepard being out. Evan Ingram's out too now. I mean, we could see Golden Tate easily have one of these games where he's getting 12 to 15 targets because other than Darius Slayton and Saquon Barkley, there's really no one else on the offense that Jones should
Yeah, I
be
believe
looking
Darius
at.
Slayton only has like 5 catches over the last month, but he still leads the team in air yards
Yeah,
in
the
that,
air yards
in
are
that
huge.
span. So if you wanted to get frisky or save salary over Tate, you can always just go Slayton over Tate, and it saves you like over 1,500. So that's always an option as well. And the last question, friendly guy asked, has Josh been notified yet that that Ian thinks he would lose in a cage match to him?
I would lose to Josh?
No, that Josh would lose to you.
Yeah, he'd be done within a round.
Has Josh been notified of
He'd be
this
done within
news
a
yet?
round.
Round.
Come on.
Well, anyways, that's the KO, and that's the round of this week's edition of Rotoworld's DFS Building Blocks. We will both be back, or we'll be back on Sunday, NBC Sports, Twitch, YouTube, and once again, we'll be back next week. So until then, rotoworld.com/DFS if you want the toolkit. Otherwise, bye from Ian Hartitz, bye from John Daigle. Good luck this week.